Ready?
Yep,
Go.
sorry.
Okay, so yeah, I'm Sarah Cordingly from Peak ENT. We have a pediatric specific section now. Team, thank you. We also still have like all of our other ENTs. I don't know if you've been to our office, but we have 6 ENTs right now. We're getting a 7th soon. We have 6 audiologists. These are the ones that manage pediatrics. So Jordan Schramm is our pediatric ENT, but we are getting a 2nd pediatric ENT, a woman, which is going to be a nice change in our office. She's starting next month. So if your kids are having trouble getting in with us, we know. That's why we're getting another one. We're busy. But then this is me, my colleague Brittany Bound and Joe Dancy. We all see pediatrics. Mostly it's me and Brittany, but Joe sees some, especially if they're Spanish speaking. Joe speaks Spanish, so. Okay.
And Joe only sees patients in Provo.
Joe only sees patients in Provo. Brittany and I both go to Lehigh. This is just our little agenda. I'm happy to deviate from this however we need to. If there are questions that I don't answer or stuff that everybody knows and is bored, then we can skip over it. So keep going. So you guys have already, you've got all the manufacturers coming in, right?
Yep.
And so this is just kind of a brief overview of their stuff and their things. To do like troubleshooting and stuff like that, you really do need to have a familiarity with each one specifically. But as far as programming goes and aided testing and things like that, that kind of stuff is very similar, or at least there are similarities between each. But that's just a sample of what they've got. Okay, mapping.
Can I ask, is it specific to insurance what system they get?
Very close. No,
Okay.
insurance doesn't care what brand.
Okay.
We're gonna hit that point.
Okay.
Yeah, the insurance point. Okay, so here's your basic mapping. This happens to be a screenshot of an AV programming screen. But you have the 2 very most common things that we mess with are called T levels and C levels. T levels are the soft sounds, and C levels / M levels. Medel and AB call them M levels. Cochlear calls them C levels, but they're really the same thing. Those are the 2 things that we mess with the very, very, very most. You want your T levels to be at a level where there's just enough electricity for that to be audible to the patient, right? And so when a sound comes in at about 20, 25-ish decibels, that presents, that much electricity so they can just hear it, right? So you can't have your T levels too high or too low, or there will be some distortion, or they will be missing stuff or whatever. So you really has to be kind of precise. M levels or C levels, that's how loud we let it go. A lot of that is based on comfort, right? Sometimes we turn it up too much and you'll get an eye twitch. So if any of your students ever have an eye twitch, let me know. We can turn that down, but that's probably, it's sort of like, if I did a big clap, some of you go like that. It's the same idea, but it's just like every time you say a word, they go like that. That's too loud. Or sometimes, they'll get upset too, right? Like if it's too loud, they're not going to be happy. That goes for adults and kids. There's also all of these other little things that we can mess with. There's a lot of detail behind the scenes. This stuff is more complex. It is less used. A lot of them are set to defaults, and we don't often change them, but we can based on certain things. But really, these are the 2 big ones. Like when you come in for a mapping session, we will do these 2 measurements every time, okay? Actually, go to the next screen. So this one's from Cochlear. This is our mapping screen. So this is what we see when we open up our software. The green bars are our T levels and the C levels are in red. Each line here represents a different electrode contact point, right? Sometimes that vocabulary gets a little confusing, right? You have an electrode array. Technically speaking, each contact point is an electrode and it sits on the electrode array, but a lot of people just refer to the whole thing as the electrode. So that's confusing sometimes. So each point, contact point on the electrode is represented by one of these lines. And that's the number of the electrode.
Why do 7 and 8 not have any?
Ha ha ha. They are disabled.
Oh.
So once in a while, for various reasons, something will happen. And actually this example, he has the same electrodes disabled on both sides, which is really weird and rare. So usually it's like that contact got damaged or something, or there's something about where it's touching the nerve that it's not doing its job quite right. There's no good connection there for something or something. There's various reasons, but we can disable them. We can turn them off so that it just doesn't even get used. That sounds like a really scary bad thing, but it's really not. It's really not. We can still offer them a wide variety of frequencies and volume and all of the things. We just do it with 2 less electrodes. So.
Okay, quick question.
Mhm.
So, just so I like have a visual.
Yeah.
When you put like the magnet in, it's that circle piece that has those. Is that's like what you can disable? Is that it?
No, so the part, ooh, did Allie leave?
She did.
Or should we just share her screen so that they can see it on the screen?
Oh, yeah, you can share the screen.
Sorry, guys. Our IT, everybody's in meetings.
So, no. More deeper.
Okay.
Deeper. So the part that the surgeon is responsible for, right? So you have the stimulator, and that's the part that sits, actually. Oh, right there. Okay. This part, right here. You have the electrode array. If you got really close to this screen, you could see there's little touch points on there. That's the contacts. That's the actual electrode. That is what I'm disabling. Okay, so it's deeper on in the system, but we do that by, the outside has to communicate with the inside, and so that's what we're changing.
Quick random question.
Yes.
Is there a reason there are 2 coils with Cochlear?
So yeah, the second little lip right there is the electric ground. So just like you would have for, a house or something, that's what that is. ABs and mid-Ls are built into the stimulator. That's what this part's called. So yeah. But when they do the surgery, and if you get really, really close, you can see there's a tiny little coil at the end. That's the part that goes in the cochlea, right? And so that part goes in the cochlea. This part, they just slip underneath the scalp. Like it just has to touch tissue.
Thank you. My student was describing it, and I'm like, there's 2?
You're like, what are you talking
Yay.
about? Yeah. I love it. All right, so down here in the purple, you can see that this is the different pitch that each of these electrodes are responsible for. You have an upper frequency and a lower frequency, right? So everything in between 7,938 and 6,938 are responsible on electrode 1. So we really do have a lot of control over pitch. Not as much as your natural ear, normally hearing ear would have, but we're doing pretty good. The T levels are here, the M levels, C levels are here. Your dynamic range is the space between your T level and your C level. Generally speaking, the wider that we can make those apart from each other, the more natural the sound will be, the less squished and weird it will be. It'll just be more natural and it'll sound more like speech rather than like a robot or something. However, you can only turn your C levels up to a certain point before that person starts twitching or starts going, too loud, right? So you try and get a bigger dynamic range if you can, but you can't always.
And Sarah, with time, you can typically go up a little bit more, right? Because
Yeah.
your body gets used to it.
Day
And so-
one, you're gonna have an itsy bitsy teeny little dynamic range because, it's like you've been in a dark room for a long time and we are just flipping on the lights. And rather than flip on the lights, we can give you a little dimmer switch, right? And so that's, we're trying to make it comfortable but audible at the same time, right? And over time, you're right, yeah, you can handle more. And then that gets more natural. Yeah, let's go on to the next screen.
Sarah, can I ask a question about the disabling of the electrode?
Yeah.
How do you know, what do you see that indicates this electrode or?
So in that case, we measure something called impedances. Impedances tell us how well is that electrode array in contact with tissue. In that case, those 2 electrodes were high, like they were gone off the charts, meaning I'm not getting any feedback from them, right? And so something is not right. He was little when we did that, but if you have an adult patient or an older kid, you can actually turn it on with those enabled and then disabled. And if they go, ugh, when they're enabled, you know you're on the right track, right? It'll make it sound weird. The other thing, a lot of times, so this is high pitch over here. This is also the end of the electrode that's furthest outside, right? So sometimes if you don't get a full insertion, or even if you get a full insertion, but that last electrode contact is like right on the outside, you're not going to get a good contact. And so some people will say, oh, that sounds really weird. And then you disable just the one electrode and they go, ah, that's great.
So is there anything you would see functionally, like that I would notice working with
Yeah,
that
so
student?
I just had an adult patient and he said, he has bilateral and he said, I've got great pitch, high pitches on this side. I don't have great high pitches on this side. So I disabled 2 electrodes in his case and he goes, oh, there they come. Because when they're enabled, you're trying to stimulate these really, really, really high pitches on an electrode that's not doing anything. And so if I disable this one and I disable this one, it's just going to rearrange all of these pitches so that these pitches are now represented on electrode 3 that is working. And so he gets those high pitches. So we're still delivering all low, mid, high pitches better.
It's
If
almost
any-
like the power's escaping through an open window.
Yep,
And you're
yep,
basically
and I'm
showing-
putting it
showing
inside.
into that other area.
Yeah, exactly,
How
exactly.
often would you say your patients need or do better with disabled electrodes?
Not often,
Okay.
not often. It's definitely the exception to the rule.
I just wondered if I'm not asking enough questions.
Yeah,
Maybe hard to
no,
know,
it's
or-
definitely an exception. And, with little kids, it's hard sometimes to know because we don't always get that like error message on the impedances. Sometimes we get the, like the guy said, like, I don't have good high pitch on this side. And sometimes you have to wait until the kid's a little bit older and they can describe those kinds of things to you. But then the other hard part is they might not have great high pitch on this side, but they don't know that because that's normal to them.
Right.
So that's where aided testing in my booth or Ling sound, stuff like that comes into play. Because sometimes I'll do a hearing test aided with the implant on and it'll look great, it'll look great, it'll look great. And then I get to 6,000 hertz and it goes like this.
Okay, so
I'm
you
like-
are seeing other behavioral
Yeah.
things when this is.
Yeah. And if 6,000 hertz goes like this, I'm like, whew, something's not right. So, yeah,
Good,
Yep.
thank you.
yeah. Anything else?
Hey, Sarah, when you're initially mapping, being an
Yeah.
audiologist who does nothing with mapping,
Yeah.
how do you notice a difference with the companies on how you initially map a student? Because to me, that blows me away. How do you figure out where they're
Where they're
hearing
set.
that
Yeah.
very small
Um,
T?
There are differences between the companies. So Cochlear, most of their algorithms, all of their behind the scenes stuff is all based on T levels, which are these really low, low input levels. AB and Med-El are based on the higher levels. And so with Cochlear, when I have a kid, and don't tell anyone, for little kids, I probably prefer Cochlear because in order to map them, I use VRA or CPA, like things, hearing testing, ways of testing that they are familiar with. They can already do these things. They've already done these things. The loudness levels we set using other means that are less kid-friendly. And so for confidence of knowing that I'm programming it right, I like using VRA and CPA, which they can already do, but more to come on that.
Yeah, and one question I have with that too, because I have noticed when I get aided testing back, there is maybe one company more than others, that thresholds are much better. They're just better. And I'm just wondering if that is a mapping thing or if that's a product
It's,
thing.
okay, it's some of both. And so Cochlears tend to be a little bit better.
That's what I've noticed.
And AB's falls just below that and Med-El's fall
Yep.
pretty far down. I know it sounds bad, right? And that's just part of how it is. And Medel and Medel and AB will tell you that that's just the,
We're all friends here. It's
I know,
okay.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to be unbiased and nice.
I'll say it, I was at AG Val, and they presented on this very topic, and they said that cochlear implants are not designed to do pure tone sounds in an audiology booth. They're
Yeah,
designed
that's
to
what Medel
process
says.
speech, and that's what, when you're actually looking at speech reception and things like that, your scores are better.
Yes.
Cochlear is still better.
But yeah.
Okay. We get it. Thank you.
And
So what
in all
they-
fairness, all three of my children have cochlear, so there you go. Just saying, that's what they
Didn't
say.
mean to start.
Okay, so but what they say, right, is that it's meant to hear speech, and we say that about hearing aids too. You will notice that like back in the day, audiologists did aided tones with hearing aids. We don't do that anymore because the hearing aid algorithms have gotten so good that if they hear a tone, they think it's feedback and they go and they squash it down. We're going to get a really, really crummy looking audiogram. So that's why we use speech for hearing aids. But the difference is for hearing aids, we have this nice thing called speech mapping that is a way for audiologists to make sure that that hearing aid is doing what we think it's doing. We don't have that for cochlear implants. So our only tool, or our most finite tool, is aided testing, thresholds, tones. And so if I have a kid with cochlear and he has crummy thresholds, I'm going, uh-oh, something's wrong with programming, with the microphone, with something. If I have like relatively crummy thresholds with Medel, it might be fine. I don't know, right? And these kids are too young to do word rec. They're too young sometimes to do speech reception thresholds, like, and so I kind of go like this until they're like 4. So,
You get a lot of emails from me.
yes. It's
What's
fine.
going on?
It's fine.
No.
It's fine. Just kidding. Okay, moving on. So, Medel. This is a screenshot of their programming screen. You can see it looks fairly similar. They have 12 electrodes versus Cochlear has 22. Again, they say like, that's great, it's fine. They have ways of, they sort of turn on a little bit of this electrode and a little bit of this electrode to kind of get one in the middle, right? So then they like almost have double the amount. I don't know.
Do parents know that there's the difference in like
Yeah.
electrodes and
Yeah.
all the things?
We go through that for sure with them. The hard part is, and this is a good case, this is why I picked this one. You can see how many electrodes I had to disable for this kid. So now he's only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 electrodes to work with. That's crap. If I had to turn off this many electrodes with Cochlear that has 22, I'm still left with a lot of electrodes that I can still play with. So well, if you have all the electrodes enabled, then it's maybe 6s. By the time you start having to disable electrodes, you really start coming out. So anyway, but these are similar things. Pulse width is something I didn't talk about. It's a fairly, I don't know, not complex, but it's something we don't mess with very often. Basically, pulse width is how long the sound is going for, right? So if you think about a cochlear implant stimulates, and it's just these little teeny bip, 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 bip. How loud is each bup, right? Sometimes if you have to make it louder, but you're still not getting the volume that you want, you can actually turn it on longer and get the more volume. So it's another way that we have of manipulating that. Medel recommends that you set the default level, the default for T's to 0. So they're off. They want your T level to be below threshold, which is fine, right? And if you're an adult, then you can tell me like I'm missing quiet sounds or whatever, but that again gets really hard when you have a little kid who can't tell me those things. I've also had it a couple of times where if you actually go in and measure these, some of them really are really far down, but some of them are not. Some of them are up here. And in those specific cases, you're missing a bunch. So anyway, the next screen is AB. This one does not have any disabled electrodes, but same idea, T levels, C levels. This is which pitch it's supporting. AB recommends that T's set to 10% of your M levels. Whoops, oh my gosh,
sorry.
don't die. But again, I've measured those on some people and they're like halfway up the graph. And all of a sudden they go, oh, that sounds great. So the default is not always the answer, which we know for a lot of stuff. But anyway, the programming method for Cochlear versus the other two, at least for littles, is just, it makes more sense, developmentally speaking. So anyway, okay. So yeah, these are the other map parameters that I have. And of course I had to get a screenshot of the Cochlear implant in the Toy Story movie. These are all other things, you know, a lot of these have to do with the actual programming, the actual software. Some of them are more functional, so like an indicator light. Sometimes we enable those, especially for little kids. We tend to disable them as they get older and they can tell us like, oh, something's wrong. Yeah, connectivity is a big one. And actually, Candy would be better at that stuff. People in the schools tend to be better than that. Okay.
So the directionality, like I called or reached out to Dan the other day because my student said, hey, when people are talking in front of me, if a kid is talking behind me, it's turning my front mic off and engaging my back mic.
That
So with
speech is
that,
probably louder.
you would bump the front mic, directional mic up and dampen the back one.
Yeah,
because you're hearing
so
behind them, right?
yeah, so all three companies have like an automatic where it changes what it does based on the environment that it's in. So in a quiet room, if it's just like you and one other person, it's basically going to be in an omnidirectional mode. It's just going to let everything in. It's not really worried about it. When you go into a noisy place like the gym or the cafeteria or something, and there's like a bazillion people talking, all of a sudden it's going to go, oh, there's a lot of noise. This is difficult. I'm going to go like this. But some of them will point to the loudest speech, right? So maybe I'm back here and my teacher's right here, but then there's a kid, you know, Joe Schmo right next to me who's going, "Mah, mah, mah, mah." Well, I'm going to hear "mah, mah, 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 mah," better than I'm going to hear this. The best way to get rid of that is a FM system.
Which they're using, so the teacher's not the problem,
great.
it's the kid
It's
that's
the other
making a
kid.
comment front versus back.
Oh, yeah. So you can, and we hesitate to do this for little kids, but you can create a second or a third program where it is like manually, I'm going to point forward. The caveat being that kid has to be old enough to understand that and know that if the teacher's talking and I'm looking this way, it's not going to get anything, right? So
they would just push their circle button on their CI and then that would, they usually hear the beep beep or you see the two flags.
yes, yep.
So that's okay,
Yep, so then you know it's in that different program, but that's certainly not,
the best.
it's not the default, it's not the normal, that's not how we
We
program.
put FM systems on every kid.
Yeah, yep, because
Or we try
yeah,
to.
FM is gonna be better than anything I can do from the software, for sure, by a long shot. So, okay, so this is one of our very cute little patients. Some of you may know her, actually. This is how we measure T's. Technically, right now, we're doing aided testing, but it was a cute video, so I had to show it. So,
Oh, what happened?
try again. So right now, the sound's gonna come out of this left speaker. And if you watch right here, so it's playing right now, she looks over. And then we reinforce the light up toy.
Oh my god. Oh my gosh.
My life. So
Well, it's our girl, it's our girl.
she's in Springfield.
I put her on
I'm like,
the
yeah.
He's like, whose is that?
I know, I'm like, a number of you probably know her.
How many little blonde girls have you seen though?
And this was a little while ago, so she's a little bigger than this now.
Not for your help.
Yeah. She's cute. She's really cute. But that was just an example. That's how we measure T's, which they know how to do. And the next one is also really cute. And he doesn't live here anymore. I'm really sad about it. But this is CPA, right? Where they hold up a toy or something and put it in the bucket. But those of you who signed in the room are going to appreciate this. He goes, I hear it. And then he goes the bowing. Isn't that so? I love that so much. But that's, again, it's something he's familiar with. That's a way of programming it that I'm like, I can do that. Okay. As they get a little bit older, sometimes we don't want the absolute threshold, right? The absolute softest sound they can hear. We want one that's just loud enough where they can count how many beeps it is. That gives us a little bit cleaner sound. And so this is a game that we play. We have like, I don't know, a frog or a lily pad or something, and we'll, as the beeps go, they'll go beep, 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 right? And if they do it right, then you know that they're hearing the correct number of beeps. As an adult, you just say 3, 4, 7, whatever, right? A little less fun, but same concept.
That's boring.
You don't have that.
No, adults are so boring.
Give it to them.
Okay,
Probably do it.
so we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier. This is loudness scales. So how loud is the sound? On a scale of 1 to 4, on 1 to 10, 1 to whatever this is. And I will tell you, even adults who heard before, lost their hearing, and got a cochlear implant have a really hard time with this. This is hard. I will, like, I'll play a beep and they'll be like, that's a 2. So I make it louder and they go, oh, that's a 1. And I'm like, oh, you know, I don't like, it's hard. It's really hard.
Okay, so just as an example, and I know what you're doing this situation. My son was getting mapped and he was just sitting there, you know, just, yeah, it's fine, whatever. And I look at him and he has this muscle in his neck. There's like twitching, like it's just, and the sound, you would tell every time that there was a signal presented, that muscle would go.
Was he doing ESRT and it was really loud?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
But I know that
That's funny.
Josh was like, okay, I think that's
So,
too
yeah,
loud.
we found it.
Like, is that something that you would say is too loud even
Yeah.
when there's no aversion?
Yeah. So it's the same thing as
The eye twitch.
the eye twitch. So the reason for the eye twitches are, I've never seen that one, but sure, why it might twitch. So when the surgeon goes in and they have to drill out some of that bone to get to the inner ear, your facial nerve is like right there. And sometimes that electrode can get near enough or even touch that facial nerve. So then every time you stimulate, it goes, right? But only if you give a big enough signal. So we have to manage that as well. Sometimes we really run into that with kids with weird anatomy, like they have a common cavity or some weird something in there. So yeah, that's hard.
It's just a natural response anyway. If somebody scratches their nose on a chalkboard, we do that with our eyes. Our eyes.
Yeah, exactly. And it's such an obvious thing. Like it's almost they can't help it, and they just go, and you're like,
So they may not have aversion, but you're still gonna turn that down because.
I don't want them walking around like,
Right.
yeah, that's gonna get sore after a while. Yeah. So, so people are not good at this, adults and kids, and so sometimes it's all you've got, and sometimes it's what you have to use because it's the only option, but it's certainly not the favorite option. If you go to the next screen, this is ESRT, electrically evoked subpedial reflex threshold. There's a muscle in your middle ear that pulls and lets go when it hears a loud sound. It also does that when you hear a loud sound through the cochlear implant. It matches really, 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 really well to where those C levels should be. It is by far the most accurate measure that we have. But, big, fat, giant but. The kid has to sit still, like pretty still, because every time they go like this, that makes a big mess on our screen, and we can't pull that out from the actual response you're looking for. You can't perform if they have an ear infection or a tube or a perforation or, weird ear that I can't seal very well. So there's a whole swath of kids who can't do it well. Some kids hate it. Some kids just freak out. There are a couple of audiologists that do this on every kid every time, no matter what. We've gotten a couple of those transfer kids and they just cry before they even get in the room because they know this is coming and they hate it so much. And so while it is, research says the most accurate thing we've got there is a lot of kids who just can't tolerate it. We just can't do it. And so that leaves AB and Medell, which you're supposed to use this to program them, can't do it. And they can't do loudness scales because they're 9 months old. So we turn it up till they cry and then we turn it down a little bit. And that's the honest truth, and that's what Med-El tells me to do. And I'm like, that's nice. What's crying? Is crying just audible? Is crying somewhere in the middle? Is crying truly too loud? I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. So anyway, you all know my opinion now. It's not hidden anymore.
Yeah, I think,
I'm glad.
I think we've got enough on video to pretty much show our biases.
Oh, good. Okay. This is from my colleague Joe. He sees more adult patients than either Brittany or myself who can tolerate that ESRT far better. They can report like, we're done, that's too loud. They don't often have ear infections or tubes or anything like that. So it just tends to go better in the adult population. But this is the response that we're looking for. So if you play, and if you can hear the beep as it goes. So look, it's hard to see, I know. There's like giant, and then he turned it down and there's no response. And he turns it up a little bit. Oh, and that's the person going, right? There's no response, and then he turns it up one more time. Back to this one. Boom, there it is. That's where you set your T levels, or your C levels, excuse me. Okay, so when it works, it's amazing, and it's awesome, and it's accurate. But you know, if you get a 2-year-old that has ADD, and it's not happening. Okay. You asked about our mapping reports, and of course, everybody's mapping reports are a little bit different, but they all include generally the same stuff. Demographic information at the beginning there, implant and activation date, which can be really important. How long have they been hearing, right? Magnet strength, which I'll be honest, if it's my report, don't look at that because I don't keep it up very well. We change those often, right? You can make the magnet on the external piece stronger or lighter depending on, is it falling off all the time or is it creating a sore? So we can adjust that. Data logging. In our reports, data logging is up on the top left here. Here's another reason. Med-El, we can't.
They said their data logging has improved.
Okay,
They said
I
they
will
have-
believe it when I see it. I've even had the rep come in and I'll be like, I don't know how to access data logging. I'm like, oh, you just do blah, 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 and then it's not there.
Only on their newest one though.
Okay, cool.
Well, they said it would revert back to the
Yeah,
other ones.
they said.
We'll see. Well, and then it was like you had to open up an old session in order to see the current. It was weird. I don't know. I'm like, I don't have time to open an old session. What are you talking about? So anyway, data, if you have a Med-El report from us, it probably doesn't have any data logging on there because we can't access it. But that's really important, right? As far as outcomes go, if you have a kid that's wearing it a half an hour a day versus a kid that's wearing it 14 hours a day, like, it speaks for itself. So we always make sure to include that on there.
So Sarah, can you speak on that? Because I have had people from out of state come in, move from Idaho and wherever, and depending on the background of their deaf education teacher, they have very differing opinions of the child needs to have breaks from their tech. And so whenever a kid takes their tech off, they let them keep the tech off the rest of the day.
Yeah.
Versus
Taking a
kids
break
that
and putting it back on.
wear it 14 hours a day. And from my own experience, I've seen a huge difference between a kid that was dying after 6 hours that 10 years of therapy may not get him where he needs to be, but a kid that wears 1 year of therapy and she's done with me, like there's very obvious differences in their success rate based off of wear time. So can you
there's
just
a,
talk
yeah,
a
there's
little
like
bit about
a,
that?
there's a little, I don't know what you call it, it's not a meme, but a saying that's like, if you wear your hearing aids or your CIs for an hour a day, it will take you like 10 years to make up 1 year of normal hearing. And there is a slight difference between hearing aids versus cochlear implants. So with cochlear implants, we are, physically stimulating that nerve, which if that CI is off, it's not happening at all. With hearing aids, if you take it off, like you're still getting something, that nerve is still being stimulated, it's not atrophying, right? But every time you take that CI off, it is. So, obviously the data logging is going to make a huge difference on your outcomes. Because if you're not stimulating that, the connection between the electrode and your nerve and all of the scar tissue and whatever else is in there is changing all the time. If you have really high data logging, that electricity is going through, and for a lack of better term, it is burning off the scar tissue. That's not actually what it's doing, but it's burning off scar
Keeping
tissue.
the pathways clear.
Yeah, and it's being consistent. And so we can tell when we measure impedances, how well that electrode is with whatever else is in there. We can tell. We don't even have to look at data logging. If they are stable and they are consistent and they are low, we're like, you have high data logging. If they're all over the place and they're everywhere, you have low data logging. The impedances actually make a difference in the way that we map. If you have stable impedances, you'll have stable maps. If you have unstable impedances, you will have unstable maps. And unstable maps are as good as not wearing your device, right? Because if you're wearing your device, but it's a really cruddy map, that's not helping, right? So the high data logging really is even more important for CIs than for hearing aids. I mean, it's important for hearing aids, don't get me wrong.
And Danzy had said, because I had a student that said it kind of is a squeaky sound, and Danzy had said that she might have gone a day without wearing it, or half of a day. And so you get squeaks and what you're hearing when you're not wearing it full time either. So that was really interesting to me because I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So even
It's
taking away
also-
speech or whatever.
We see this sometimes for little kids who have a hard time, like they pull it off a lot and the parents aren't maybe quite so good at like putting it back on 4,000 times a day. Because then the next morning they try and wake up and put it on and the kid's like, ah! And you're like, yeah, it's too loud because you weren't wearing it. Because your impedance has changed and therefore your map changed. And so now it's a cruddy map. And it might be that it's really, really loud now. But if you would just keep wearing it, it wouldn't be loud. And that's a really hard thing for parents to understand sometimes.
So do you have any type of presentation that tells that information in
The
very
impedances?
layman terms for a student, for me to show to my students and say, so this is the gig. When you don't wear it, this is why.
It's like opening doors in the movie theater every time you put it on.
Yeah, and it's super bright. Yeah, and it's super loud.
Or into a
No,
concert
I
hall.
don't, but I could.
Okay.
I could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My email.
Okay, my email is at the end of this presentation.
Okay.
Send me an email.
I think it'd be great for actually all of us. to
Yeah.
teach our
Yeah.
students,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we-
For sure.
How many of you guys argue with your students?
Oh,
Okay. Right.
every single one in middle school and some
necessarily
in
argue
upper
with
middle.
Anybody
And
with one.
Sarah, their Link 6 is gonna be all over the place too.
Right.
Possibly.
So, because I always am like, hey, this kid, these two sounds were off when you map next time, we watch for those.
Yep.
But I have one child that's like all over the place.
Yeah, and it's different every
The
day.
wear time is very inconsistent. And
Yep.
so it's just interesting how, like, the first time your Ling is off and then they get programmed and then their Ling should be good for a long while if they're
long as they
consistently
wear
wearing
it.
them. But if not, and you keep getting a funky Ling, then it may be that they're not actually wearing their tech when they're at home. They're wearing it at school, but not at home.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
we watch for it.
So this can tell you whether so we put impedances right on here. Right impedances, left impedances. We'll put something like stable or within normal limits or something like that. Then you know it's good. If we're like saying it's all over the place, then there's a good indicator that should match that data logging typically. If you have great data logging and you know it, that kid is a rock star, and suddenly their impedances are weird, that's a big fat red flag. Big giant huge red flag.
Might be advanced phonics with a cable that's cracked.
Yeah, that too. It has been cracked for like 6 months.
Yes.
Could that seriously be something
goes-
like EVA or something like that though? Like if it was like way.
Well,
off.
no, so if you have funky, well, I've seen that once or twice. Yes, EVA. is a
What's
weird-
that?
If they had EVA.
Enlarged vestibular aqueduct. And so basically you have your parts of your inner ear, off of the middle part of your inner ear, there's this little like river and a lake that comes off of it. The river's too big. And so all of that fluid in there goes blah, 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 all over. And so sometimes we can see that, not often though. Usually EVA patients are our best performers
Insane.
because everything else is normal, right? All their other anatomy is normal. Anyway,
But with hearing aids, it's terrible because they could test great one day and then the next day they're
and
profoundly
their
deaf.
thresholds go like this, yeah.
Yeah.
So
So for hearing aids.
for impedances, if impedances are really funky and your data logging is good, that might be a device failure, which is never a fun conversation to have. Yeah. We'll tell you how we got T levels and C levels. Do we do it with standard? Do we do VRA, whatever? Different programs. So if we had programmed in, you know, a manual directional thing, that will be here as well. If you can't access it, we might have forgotten to enable the button. I've done that before, so of course. Yeah, battery life estimates will be here, and then recommendations when they should come back and stuff like that. So, yeah. Pretty basic stuff.
Are you gonna go over the AZ bio? Is that on there? Or is that-
Next, yeah, aided testing is next. So, I guess not next. So
Sorry.
this is just a little detail on all the different chunks of our mapping reports. Progressive programs. When I first activate a kid, I will give them a really, really soft program. It may not be audible. It's for sure a crappy program, but it's one they'll keep on their head. And that's step one. Once you can get them to keep it on their head so they're not freaking out that it's loud every time, and just like you said, over time you can tolerate more and more and more. So the first couple of weeks, we see them for activation, we see them a week later, we see them a week later. In between those appointments, we might give them a few different programs. Each one's a little bit louder. And that's just our way of not having them come back every day for those first few weeks, right? You can kind of change stuff on your own in a predicted way. So some people are better at going through those than others, but that's okay. Yeah. Any questions on the mapping reports?
I couldn't remember what impedances were.
Yeah, impedances, so the electrode is in there. How well is it connected to the scar tissue and the nerve and the tissues in there? And it should be stable and low, right? So your impedance is how much stuff is in the way from the electrode to the nerve, how much stuff is in between.
So like the pathway, what's being impeded.
Yep, you want less. Less is better. Less is more. Okay, so here's where AZ Bio and whatnot comes into play. Our top of our report says assessment of auditory rehabilitation status reports. That's because that's what insurance wants us to say, and so we will get paid for it if it says that. But what it means is aided testing. Okay. Ideally, and for an older kid, we'll try and get thresholds in each ear from 250 hertz to 6,000 hertz. We don't do 8 because implants suck at 8. They just do. And so we're going to get a crappy threshold there. But 6, they should get 6,000. Like I said before, there's no real ear verification, no speech mapping, no anything like that that we have for hearing aids for cochlear implants. And that's why we have to do all of this. Speech reception or speech detection threshold, that's how soft can you hear with your tech on. And so we'll try and do spondies, which are hot dog, airplane, baseball, popcorn. If we can't do that, they can't repeat that, they don't know those, they don't have the language for that yet, we'll do body parts, nose, eyes, hair, whatever. If they still can't do that, we'll just go pop, 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 and then turn and light up the toy. Right. So. Word recognition, this is a single syllable word list, and it's based on the vocabulary age of each child. So when they're little, we have different lists than when they're older, and their vocabulary level changes. If you don't match your vocabulary list to the age of the child, then you're gonna get like abnormally high or low scores if you went too hard or too easy.
What are the age spans for those? Are they each year or are they every couple years?
No, they're like a couple years. Yeah. And then once you get to like 7 or 8, it's like adult list. Sometimes I do adult lists on my 3-year-olds because that's where they are. And I don't have a harder test than that. That's the hardest I got. There's no context here. The dog ate the bone. You know that's bone whether you heard it or not. But this is, say the word swivel. You have to hear the whole word in order to get it right. Like there's no faking that. Then we do have sentence recognition. And honestly, one of the biggest reasons that we do this is insurance. This is what they look at both for candidacy or if we needed to re-implant someone or whatever. But it's also a good way for us to it's a little more real life than just a single word is. We also sometimes do it in noise. So we'll have background noise like people talking coming out of the back speaker or sometimes the front speaker if we want to make it really hard and see how they can do. Some kids do really well and some kids just tank in noise. And the kids who tank in noise are even more so the ones that need an FM system. They all do, like we've said. But we do this before they get the implant if we can, if they age-wise are able, and then we use that as a baseline moving forward. We want to see improvement over time. Their parents always ask, like, what is it going to look like 5 years down the road? And I'm like, ooh, I don't know. Because there's so many different things, right? Age of implantation, how long have you had the hearing loss? What do your parents talk like at home? Do is ASL the primary language at home? Well, your spoken language has a different expectation, right? Versus, what's their anatomy like? Actually, I think all of this is on the next slide. Oh, never mind.
Can I ask a quick question though? So like when you're talking to those parents though,
Yeah.
about an FM system, I read this thing from the Canadian Audiology, whatever association, and it talked about streamers versus like Roger phone app, and how streamers are not as effective when we think about our resound mini mics, when we think about even edge mics and any other streamer specific for a CI versus using like the Roger phone app.
Yes, yes. So I am not an educational audiologist. That is my biggest like.
Well, I think the difference is that a streamer's only gonna knock you up
Right.
10 for your signal to noise ratio. And the touchscreen mic is gonna
So-
drop you like 20 signals.
Yeah.
And so when you're telling them they are gonna need an FM, because it's funny when parents go, nobody told me that, and I'm like, yes,
We
they
talk
have.
about remote mics all the time.
Exactly, and we know that.
Yeah.
Especially when I see your name, I'm like, oh, you know.
So, a couple of considerations. Cochlear implants come as a package, and that package might come with a mini mic. It might come with whatever Med-El's is called. It might come with Phonak Roger. And in my head, the implant itself is more important than the remote mic system, just because they're going to be using that more long term. But that's not to say you can't put a Roger on a cochlear, right? So, as the clinical audiologist who deals with insurance and self-pay and all of that, I will tell you right now, parents do not buy Roger. It is way, way too expensive. Way.
Just so that you know, and we got this clarified, and this is one of my biggest complaints. Even if they do get Roger, it is not one you can use in the school.
Yes, so the Roger that I get is different than the one you get.
Absolutely, we still have to get.
Yes, yep.
And it can, because we have like pens and we do have Roger ons now, but you can't use the mic, the preferred educational mic.
Yes. So,
We have that very big.
I don't know. I think the correct answer is I don't know that I'm going to speak on. I definitely don't tell them you need a Roger, right? That's not my
You can't
place.
either, you're liable to,
Yeah.
insurance gets paid for.
No, I'm not. The
We are.
reverse is true. If you recommend something, you have to pay for it.
Yes.
The schools.
The same is not true for me. Yeah.
So I just finished, I don't even remember, my program at USU. I didn't go for the degree because I already had, but anyway.
Yeah.
And Cash Pitt was my professor. And in a group project that we had to do, it ended up that we talked about the social piece of going to an audiologist and how the trauma that adults, that parents go through when they're told, and then they're freaked out. Okay, even if they've digested it and they're over the grief period, which is almost never the case.
Right.
But they don't really hear
No.
everything you
No.
say.
What do they hear,
So-
like 7% or something? I think
One
is
of
the
my
statistic.
colleagues in my group, so this was a major point that we presented in our group project back, was when, not that we as outreach teachers end up having contact with the parent before they go through this.
Yes, yeah.
But if we're in that process, that we highly recommend, when you get to the audiologist's office, you press record on your
I
phone
have a lot of parents who do that.
and record the whole thing, so you
I
can listen
have
to
a
it
lot of parents who
over and
do
over
that.
again to digest.
Also, like if only mom is there, dad can't be there or
Right.
something, they record it a lot in those cases. Yeah. And we try and go over the material again and again and again and again because we know, we are
Right.
quite aware.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny, you know, like we'll do a hearing test on a kid. We will do bone conduction. Or even an adult, and we'll do bone conduction. They will come back 6 months later, they're like, I've never done this before. I was like, I literally was the one that did this. Right?
Yeah.
Their memories suck, and that's fine, you know, and some parents are like, I had no idea about all of this. And I'm like, I know, but I do. And that's, so it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay that you don't know anything. That's expected, right? So I know, and those parents all go through that way differently than the next one.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think that's the power in collaboration, like,
Yes.
and I feel like we as a district have worked extremely hard
Yeah.
to be with in collaboration with Peak. I'm texting Cash probably on a daily basis. I text you guys probably on a daily basis.
And that's
Because
great.
it's like, this parent came to me and said this, I know this is not what you would have said.
But
Tell
this
me
is what
what
I
you
heard.
said so I can explain it
And
back to her.
I think Stephanie's on, yeah, she's on Zoom, but she called me the other day and I was like, this person says they don't have an FM system. She's like, I put an FM system on it like 6 weeks ago. And I was like, I knew you did. This is just what mom said to me, so I don't know. Anyway, that's,
But it
yeah.
helps with the collaboration, because you guys don't have the time to go over it 7 times. Or we can set up
Only
times with
6.
these families. Well, I'm just saying, we can set up time with family and like really give them that.
And sometimes, you know, we do that too. Who was it? There was a kid and, oh, it might be you actually. This kid who really needs cochlear implant. Mom is freaked the freak out.
It was me.
And so sometimes I'm like, look, this is what I have said to the parent. Let me know what you get from that parent. Let me know how they're feeling, because sometimes they act differently. I especially know this with early intervention. They will cry their eyes out with early interventionists at their house. They will not give me a smile, a frown, and anything. They are just blank. And I'm like, I can't read them. And then the early intervention is like, what, are you kidding me? I'm like soaked from her tears. Like, so I get something different sometimes just because I'm in an unfamiliar place. I'm in a clinic, you know, and so
I
it's
love it
different.
when they know that we're in contact. It's like, well, you're saying you can't get in, but she just emailed me back within 10 minutes.
Also, if you call our phone girls, you might not get in for 6 weeks, but if you call me, I'll probably get in tomorrow because I will do some magic. I don't know. Not always. That's not a guarantee.
Not always, but no. I mean, because I've had a couple of parents,
Someone that really
and I'm
needs to
like,
get in.
no, I had another girl mom call today and she's in next week. Like,
Yeah, I know.
I have a random question that kind of goes with what you're doing before.
Yeah.
Is there a reason you would implant someone on the ear that had better hearing first? So the student is older, so I'm wondering if that ear just had more stimulation, so you're choosing that ear first?
Yes. And I think it's also part of the equation is, are they planning on getting a second one?
Yeah.
Right? If they are planning on getting a second one, sometimes we do the worst ear first, because that has had the longest amount of time without anything or the least amount of stimulation. And so time is more of the essence with that ear than the other ear. But if we know for sure they're only ever going to get one, like they have told us that, like, I hate surgery, I'm not going to do it again, we might as well hit the nail on the head, we're going to do the better ear, as long as it's a candidate.
But they're gonna be without comprehension for a good month or 2. Like, so they're gonna miss all the academics for 2 months.
Yeah.
Which,
Yeah, and so when that happens, and I had one in Candy's district, we had to bilaterally re-implant her, and it was in the middle of the school year, and I was just like, I can't, like, but I was like, yes, I know.
I
And
went
We'll play
to
catch
the
up.
home every week to work with her
Yeah.
because there was no reason
No.
for her to even go in the
was bad.
classroom.
yeah, it was bad.
And then does it destroy all residual hearing?
What?
Would it destroy all residual hearing?
Good question.
Yeah,
Because they hear that.
yes, okay. And we had this conversation the other day. Hybrid. Let's talk about the word hybrid. There are 2 ways to talk about what hybrid means. Hybrid, there is an electrode, the internal part that the surgeon is responsible for, that is called a hybrid electrode. It is short. It only has 12 electrodes on it. The point is that it only goes in halfway. That way you don't touch the parts of the cochlea that are still healthy and hearing fairly well. However, we can put a standard electrode in there and still get great hearing preservation, impressive hearing preservation. And so one way to talk about hybrid is the actual electrode that is called a hybrid electrode. A lot of people talk about the external part that has a cochlear implant and hearing aid in one as a hybrid electrode or as a hybrid implant, right? So sometimes when you're having conversations with people and they're talking hybrid, you're like, do you mean external or internal? Because there is a difference. We can still use a hybrid external with a normal internal.
you just don't activate those electrodes at the frequency.
No, we do.
that you're still hearing.
Right, yes, we changed the frequency allocation. So the software screenshots that I showed you before where it said, here's what pitches are responsible for each electrode. You can change that so that this lowest electrode doesn't start stimulating until 1,000 hertz or 500 hertz or whatever it might be, right? Yeah, you can,
on the low.
yeah, because you still have your hearing aid that's doing that part. Now, if later on that hearing goes because you have Meniere's disease or you have EVA or you have whatever that's a progressive hearing loss, well, then we can reprogram it later, get rid of that hearing aid part and just do cochlear or just adjust it as needed.
Is
So,
that being done on kids or just mostly adults?
I had a student with it like 15 years.
not little kids, primarily because, at least with cochlear, the hearing aid part is a rick, like the wire, it's not a tube. And it's very fragile and it doesn't stay in very well. And also logistically, it's just a nightmare. But as they get older, if they still have, and figuring out what residual hearing is left afterward is way low on the priority list. And so we don't sometimes get there for a year or two because we're trying to figure out everything else. And so, yeah.
You know, it is amazing because I've had several kids that have come to your place and I'll have, you know, pre-op testing. They go in and get a cochlear implant and their thresholds are minimally changed. And which is amazing.
There's one that was in your district, she graduated.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, her thresholds hardly even changed.
Yeah.
Whereas years and years ago, they'd have nothing.
Yep.
And
That's
everything
not
would be
the
gone.
rule anymore at all.
That is not the rule, yeah, which I love.
And I know in our clinic, that's a really, really big priority. We really, really, really
sure.
pay attention to that. And I don't know that that's the case with all clinics,
It isn't.
but, but there are those out there that, yeah, we can save a lot of hearing, but that's not to say that hearing's not gonna go by itself anyway later. So sometimes, you know, people come in with like a 90 dB threshold, they're like, we have to save that. I'm like, why? For what? Well, you're not using it, you know? So, yeah, anyway. This is a sample of ADA testing. I mean, I know I'm like out of time, but here's thresholds. This is an example of somebody who does really well. She got her left cochlear implant when she was little, like 1, 2 maybe, and then got her right one when she was like 16. So you can see percentage-wise, she's getting 96, 97% correct. On her new side, she's getting kind of iffiness. Anyway, even cases like this where they don't get it great by itself, they really like having a second side just to get some balance and to get some localization and things like that. So it just basically is there to support the first side, more or less. But anyway, that's an example of, and if you ever see this start time, end time, don't pay attention to that. That's also an insurance thing. You don't care about that. But also, this is in noise. So she got 75% correct in a +5 dB SNR. So lots and lots and lots of background noise, and she's still just rocking.
But couldn't you expect, like, because you can take the one old implant off and rehab the new implant.
To a point, but if you got it at 16 and you've had profound hearing loss since you were born.
No, but I'm saying, like, if you go deaf in one side and then you were to go deaf in the other side.
Oh, yeah.
You have a way different benefit.
Yeah,
from
we always,
doing
in
it.
cases like that,
Yeah.
we always recommend that you spend some time without your first implant. And even in cases like this, we recommended that. But we talk really, really heavily about expectations for a second side at this age. Really.
Because it
really
was a
heavily.
16-year gap of no sound.
Yep, no hearing aid or anything. And so she's done especially well. She got 60% correct on single word. So NU6 is a single word list. AZ Bio is a sentence list. So she's doing better. And actually she has an older sister who was 18 when she got her second one. She doesn't do nearly as well. So even a couple of years, maybe, big difference. It's weird. Anyway, I will hurry through the rest. Oh, this was a question I got asked and I got my answers from Candy. Some of this, you know, the ling sounds, you can depend on my ADA testing report. And if you don't believe that that's right, have them come in. Maybe it's changed and I will do it again. I have a lot more of a controlled environment than you guys do. And I can pull stuff out that maybe you can't in the classroom. You can listen to the mics. Keep in mind you're only listening to the mics. You are not listening to, you know, anything except whether that microphone is working or not. These are some red flags that you might notice, and that might be reason for you to send them back to me and make sure nothing has changed. And that's true for hearing aid kids too, not just CIs. Call me or email me. Like these people have said, like I talk to these guys many times every week, all the time. So
And you're allowed to talk to us about ours. Like, I just wanted to say the
Yeah.
privacy thing.
Yeah, no, we don't. We've been asked that question before, and it's we consider it under that like continuing care Like, it's your care, under your care and under my care. I know most
All
school
of our
district
parents are
people.
ecstatic when they know we know you.
And it's like, and you do remap them, or you do a new report, and it just comes right to my email, and I don't have to have the mom.
I know.
Can you please give me this?
And I was asked too, I'm like, do you want me to just email this to them? And the parents are like, oh, yes. I'm like, done. And it's easier for me too. So anyway, yeah, email me, call me, even if it is not my patient, even if I don't know you, email me. If you just have a general question about something or even a specific question, just, you know, hide their demographic information from me and ask away. I'm happy to whatever.
Because if you're not a programming audiologist, meaning CI programming audiologist, they do not think the same way about implantation, because 5 years ago, they passed that you can get a single-sided implant, 5-ish years. And in the past, you had to be deaf enough in the worst ear to get implanted. So a lot of them are still with that educational background, and they don't realize that they
Or just
can
clinical
implant.
audiologists that see adult hearing aids, you know, they don't know when to send over. If you're ever wondering, like, should this kid have a CI? Email me, I'll look at it. Okay. I only have a couple more. So here's a list of things I thought of off the top of my head that can affect outcomes. And so if you're like, this kid's not getting 100% correct, I'm like, was he implanted at 10? Like, no, that's how it goes. So anyway, that's some stuff I could think of. CI candidacy, this was a question that came up. This is the thing that you should remember. Will they pay for it? Nobody can pay for this out of pocket, nobody. So that's really what it was. So when a new implant gets FDA approval, it's not like the FDA says, cochlear implants in general now have this criteria. Each implant company, when they come out with a new one, has to say, hi FDA, here's what we would like approved. And it costs a lot and it takes a long time. And so that's why it doesn't happen very often. But so each manufacturer, technically speaking, has a little bit of a different criteria. Depends on age too, right? Adults, they have to have sentence testing or they will not get approved. Kids, obviously, that's not the case. I have to do a questionnaire that says they're not making auditory progress, and that's good enough.
But
So,
you said the insurance doesn't care which brand they give you, so how do you know which brand then, how do we get lucky enough to have kids who get cochlear versus?
You're welcome.
Cordingly.
no, it really depends. We try. Okay, I'll be honest. This stays in this room.
Pause the recording.
Pause the recording.
I don't recommend Meadow to anybody. I tell them there's a third company, and if you want me to tell you about it, I will. I'm happy to do that. But personally, I don't like it. And the kid that had to get reimplanted had Meadow, and I think honestly, she's a big reason why I'm like, I don't touch it. I don't go there. And there are lots of little reasons other than that. But between Cochlear and AB, I try and present them unbiasedly. But inevitably that parent goes, well, if it was your kid, or what do you do the most of, or whatever. And I'm like, I have to answer truthfully, and I do. So anyway.
Don't let them go, don't let them get it based on color.
No. Oh my gosh, there are stickers.
They do.
Stickers.
They
There
do.
are stickers. I know, and we tell them that. We're like, there's a bazillion stickers on Etsy. Adorable stuff. But AB does have rockin' colors.
They do.
Absolutely, they do. Okay, so but this is general criteria. You have to have a crap ton of hearing loss, and you have to have really cruddy. No, that's the technical term. You have to have really cruddy word recognition, right? So actually, go to the next screen. This is a really brief overview of like over time. You know, this is way back when you had to be deaf as a freaking post, both ears. You couldn't have a single threshold, or you were not a candidate. Then we sort of kind of were like, well, maybe you can have severe to profound hearing loss. This is current Medicare criteria. Oh, and they just changed this to 60, like yesterday. So not only though, do you have to have like enough hearing loss, and this is a moderate to profound is what the criteria says for Medicare. You have to have less than 60. Now, I didn't have a chance to change that since yesterday. Imagine that. You have to have less than 60% word recognition. And there's very specific ways that we have to test that, aided at 60 dB SPL. But it doesn't say whether noise or not or anything. So we fudge it a little bit when we have to, but hybrids came in many years ago. But again, hybrid internal versus hybrid external, right?
What is that representing then? The internal?
This is just an audiogram.
No, but the hybrid, is that representing the
Both, I
internal?
guess. They both came out at the same time, and so I think that's another reason it gets really confusing. So anyway, but less than 60% word rec, which now matches the Medicare criteria. And the reason Medicare criteria is so important is because a lot of private insurances base off of Medicare criteria, so that's important to know. Single-sided deafness, I know this is really confusing, but this is like one person right here. So you can see they have a lot of hearing loss on one side, but normal hearing on the other. We can do this now, right? And we have to have, and this one's not.
Lots of kids going in and getting that done now.
Yeah, who were not candidates before, and now we get the like 15-year-olds who are like, well, I was told it wasn't possible. I was like, it wasn't, but now it is. So, but this is a thing. This is definitely a thing. This thing we're doing a lot, and people are very happy. Because before this, the best option was a Baja, which does great, but it doesn't actually stimulate that ear. You're not hearing on that side. So, anyway.
Can I add for that kind of loss, if you're doing oral rehab, the best way to do it is through Zoom, through a microphone, so that they're good
Or
ear
through the
can't
next,
hear it.
the next room, yeah.
So I try to do it in person and their good ear overhears it, so you need to be in a different location if possible.
Or plug that up. Really, really good.
I did with the mold and it still didn't work. She heard me through the door.
So when we do testing with this in our booth, I put an insert in with masking in that ear. And that's the only way we have found to really, truly, we're not listening on that side. But anyway, okay. Ta-da. This is my cute patient. So, okay, like I said, my email is right there. Anytime, even if it's not my patient or you just have to, whatever, email me. I'm pretty good with email. Phone is hard because I'm busy. But email I'm pretty good about. Okay.
Okay.